I don't have these cards.
I'll get them for you.
All right, good morning. My name is Scott Stringer, New York City Comptroller, and I'm joined today by Marjorie Landa, Deputy Controller for Audit and Investigations, no stranger to all of you, and Julia Davis, who's the Director of Research and Investigations in the Controller's Office. We are here today to release the results of an investigation that show a troubling and persistent culture of concealment at the MTA. Our investigation found that for years, the MTA knowingly misled the public with distorted and meaningless data on city subway delays. What's worse, MTA executives knew it because they were warned about it. But they ignored those warnings for years and continued to release bad data, masking operational problems in the process. And instead of accepting responsibility for the crumbling subway system, they blamed delays on overcrowding even as ridership plummeted. This was their strategy. We know this because we found internal documents, never before made public, written by MTA employees inside the agency's own performance analysis unit. And these documents reveal, in no uncertain terms, how unreliable the MTA's measurement and reporting of subway delays was. One memo expressingly read, "Much of the delay data is incomplete or unreliable, particularly the classification of delays and the assignment of delays to particular incidents." And another, pointing to what that might be, stated flatly, "No policy or guidance exists on how dispatchers should properly identify the cause of a particular delay." I just want to repeat that. The largest subway system in the United States had no policy or guidance on identifying the causes of delays. MTA execs continued to release the flawed data as the report card of their progress. They released this data to the MTA board, to the press, and to the public at large. For example, weight assessment was one of the MTA's most emphasized and important metrics for years. It was supposed to assess service quality by measuring how long a person has to wait for a train against its established schedule. For a while, the MTA reported to the public that weight assessment data showed things getting better underground, even when the riding public experienced service that was anything but getting better. So all the people who were coming home at night or going to work in the morning complaining about the delays in the subway system were then met by MTA data that said that they were wrong. Well, this was all bogus. MTA officials touted improvements in the numbers at the start of many of its board meetings, giving the false impression of that progress. And meanwhile, internally, MTA analysis called the improvements in weight assessment statistically meaningless and the result of sample error. Sample error, or another way of saying, we don't know, we have no idea. The same could be said about how the MTA dealt with delays marked internally as unknown. So get this, there were delays that the MTA could not explain. They didn't know. But instead of being honest and say, we don't know how hundreds and thousands of delays were being cataloged, the MTA buried them. They buried them in the sand. And here's how they did it. They literally took the unknowns and folded them into other categories like overcrowding or sick passenger. And we know that from 2013 to 2018, a 5-year period, the MTA hid 500,000 unknown delays. And they spread it out over all of these categories. They misrepresented 500 million delays, and they believed they were going to get away with it. But through this investigation, we've not only revealed how MTA executives knowingly misled the public in the past, we've also shown that despite some recent changes, the culture of concealment is alive and well at the MTA. Because now the MTA has a new and important metric. Now they call it major incidents. The agency defines a major incident as an event that causes delays of 50 trains or more. Major incident. But major incidents does not include a huge category that disrupts our subway service every day, and that's the MTA's own planned work. Planned work includes non-emergency projects, all of which have increased under the Subway Action Plan. This is needed work, but you know it delays whole subway lines. But unbelievably, the MTA does not even count delays caused by planned work as a major incident. So here they go again. We exposed what they did in the past was wrong and bogus and was a cover-up. You would think going forward, they would come clean and create a metric that is transparent. But now, even though they talk about major incidents, they don't talk about the major work that has to happen. So the public is left in the dark once again. The board is left in the dark once again. And I believe it's time for the MTA to come clean with the public about its numbers and statistics. Now, on some of these findings, Andy Byford has acted decisively. But he needs to acknowledge that despite the changes, new metrics like major incidents are still misleading the public, plain and simple. No debate. It's got to come clean. And we need full disclosure of what is and what isn't included in major incident reporting. The MTA makes it appear that there are fewer service disruptions than there really are. He needs to be more transparent about how data was distorted for so many years, where it continues to be unreliable, and why there was never any accountability for the executives who ignore the warnings on this data. So if you knew the data wasn't accurate, and you knew that you were putting out false data, and you were cataloging the delays in a way that didn't give us a clear view of what was going on, we have to have accountability. The Inspector General must be involved now to look at what happened over these last few years. And the reason we have to know is because we're asking strap hangers to buy into the fast forward plan. People need to know that they're not being lied to by the MTA. We now understand through this investigation the disconnect between the person coming home from work or trying to get the kids to school in the morning that had to wait for these delays, and then they would get a report from the MTA that said, you were not seeing things accurately. What you felt in that delay was not really a delay. The major incidents back underground was not really happening according to the MTA. So basically, public, you were being totally inaccurate in what you thought was happening to you. We know better. This investigation shows that this was just one big cover-up. So we asked today for this to stop, and we asked the MTA and the Inspector General to fully give us a transparent accounting of the past and also change the future, which means we need real accurate reporting. We're going to go to Albany on congestion pricing. We're going to go to Albany on a package that could total $30–40 billion. I'm going to Albany on Monday to talk to state leaders about our budget and about the MTA. The first question they're going to ask is, just tell us the truth. Tell us what's exactly going on. So I don't think this is Frankenstein, but I do think this is a cover-up. And I do think data has been suppressed. And that should anger everyone. That should anger the MTA board. That should anger the strap hanger. That should anger the press, because it certainly angers me. So Marjorie and Julia, thank you for this investigation, and we'll be happy to take any questions on this topic.
The MTA says that what you're revealing today are things that they have already taken action to improve upon since Byford has come on board, and that this is nothing they didn't know about, nothing they haven't already attempted and are in the process of correcting.
Well, shame on them for not disclosing to the public that there were 500 delays that they purposely spread out throughout the system. Where's the accountability? Where's the accountability?
But these, sorry,
Yeah.
500,000, right?
Yeah. Where's that? I haven't seen that.
No, okay. Did you say there were 500 delays? You meant to say 500,000?
500,000.
But just to clarify the timeline here, Andy Byford has said what you were saying at MTA board meeting, that they needed to change how they classify delays. They did change it. Some of the MTA watchdogs, like Transit Center, praised them for doing it. So tell us why this isn't just old information.
Well, first of all, going forward, as we just mentioned, we are now looking at the way they're categorizing major incidents, and what we're seeing is they're up to the same tricks because they're not including their own work. So that's something that I would ask you to take to an MTA board meeting. They have not fully explained the delays that they could not catalog, the 500,000 incidents. That is new to this investigation, and that's something that you don't have, and we present that to you today.
So how did you confirm that these were actual delays? Like, if they seem to have no process, how did you?
Through going through internal documents and memos, and if you foil for some of those documents, we can certainly get them to you. Do you want to say something?
Yeah. I mean, we looked at all of the underlying data that got fed into these reports, and that's where we were able to discern that there was a massive unreliability in the data, some of which has continued with the new systems that they're using. So they've not eradicated all of the issues and the unreliability of what they're seeing. What you do see is where, fairly accurately, where, you know, the train gets to a station late. That gets reported. It's the causation issues that are built on a very rickety foundation that we found needed to be addressed. It's based on all of the information. Our analysis, we had a team pouring through this data, and we interviewed people at the MTA extensively. And there are people inside who seem to know what's going on, and the real key is being, in our view, transparent and ensuring that the riding public knows, so that, you know, as the comptroller said, we know what's going on in the system.
So they just sick passenger could be like a made up, just a made up.
Well, what we
Get the tweet or the
by burying unknown delays into other categories for public reports showed a campaign of concealment. And when you spread that over multiple categories, then what you basically have is an admission that not only didn't you know what was causing the delay, but you also made sure that that didn't come to the public discussion, whether that was at the press or in the public.
But to be clear, you're saying this campaign of concealment has continued under Byford?
I think that the fact that we have a new category called major incidents that don't catalog the work that the MTA is doing, needed work to be sure, is what got them into trouble in the first place. So yes, I take issue with that, and I think we should have a different metrics that is totally transparent, that looks at every single reason why we have these delays. You know, when this started years ago, it started as a simple alignment or concealment of hidden data, right? First, blame it on overcrowding. Then we found that actually the system was not overcrowding. We were losing hundreds of thousands of riders, so now they needed to do something else. What this report shows that internally, executives knew exactly what was going on. So yes, do I credit Andy Byford for telling the public what should have been told years ago? Yes, but that's half the story. What happens now? Do you give a pass to the executives who, in memos, understood what was going on, and yet nothing has happened? Where's the Inspector General? Where's the complaint? And where is the drill down here? That's what we're getting out based on our investigation.
So then, just a quick follow-up. Along those lines, do you agree with the governor that the MTA needs to be broken apart, and should the city take control of the site?
Well, right now, the city first has to implement a fair program, which they can't seem to do. So putting that aside, I think that the issue here is not about who wants to wrest control from each other. Right now, we have to go to Albany and get the funding necessary to keep this system afloat. And I would argue to you that the best way to wage that campaign in Albany is to come clean and fix a system that is broken, that is not transparent. And the fact that people think that telling 50% of the story to the public in Andy Byford's case is just not good enough when we're asking for $40 to $50 billion. We can't have it both ways. We need full transparency. We need to understand why they took those 500,000 delays and spread them across different categories, even though they couldn't tell what those categories were for. It creates a whole distrust within the system. That's why we went in and did the investigation.
2 questions, guys.
I'll do a couple more. I'll do a couple more, not 2.
What do you consider to be the motivation for this? And I ask you because people think the MTA stinks as it is.
My personal observation in reading the investigation, the reports, I think there is a culture of cover-up at the MTA that is not just about this generation of MTA management, but this has been part of the standard operating procedure for a long time. Back in the day, it didn't matter when the trains were running on time. But everything is getting exposed now because of the delays that the public feels. There is, I mean, you've done the stories. Every day, somebody comes home and tells their loved one why they're delayed an hour and the horror on the subways. They're telling 1970s and 80s stories in 2018. And then, as these stories were told, the MTA was not owning the issue. What the MTA was saying was that the public was wrong. The executives were saying, you're making this up because we're putting out data that suggests that the public is not understanding what's happening. This investigation today shows a much different accountability focus that the MTA had, and I find it troubling.
Did the MTA think this was going to make them look better?
Well, if no one does an investigation and you could put out data and you're not held to that data, yeah, they're doing fine until today, right?
Scott, in the last few months, the MTA has reported something of an upswing, an uptick in its on-time performance, in the delays. Do you think those numbers are bogus?
I think that the MTA owes us a full analysis and accounting as to how they catalog delays, how they view the different buckets that they keep telling us. And while I like to believe that they've gone from a 58% to a 72%, success rate, I think that is all good, but we need to drill down and actually have an understanding of the numbers.
Scott, can you just kind of clarify here for a second? You're not saying that the number of delays is fudged. You're saying the reasons for the delays
Yes.
is fudged. Just to follow up, I'm still a little unclear then. Why would, if it's a fire on the tracks is what's causing the delay, why would they put that in sick passenger? Why would they put that in overcrowded? Why does that make
because they found they could not account for 500,000 delays. So they did not want to own up to this. And it was easy to spread out those delays that they couldn't catalog by just throwing them into different buckets because nobody would notice until we did the investigation.
So how is it that they failed to know about these delays? Is somebody not reporting them?
They actually knew the delays were happening. We can see that there were also internal memos and information that they were receiving that gave them indications of what some of the causes might be, which is what currently the current administration is beginning to address. But no one was pressing them to address it before when they were saying this was overcrowding. And then the disconnect happened between the passenger numbers going down and yet overcrowding was, delays were still rising precipitously. And now they're reporting changes, but they're also reporting that they're addressing concerns that were raised years ago but never really made public.
Can you just also, just to answer, I want to go back to, just in terms of the incidents that they couldn't catalog and just explain the investigative role.
What we saw really were in the underlying data, as I'd said before, we really dug deep into what it was that they rolled up to say was overcrowding. And inside of that was a substantial amount of information that suggested each one of the trips that got counted as overcrowding was actually, many of them were in this unknown category. They were just a category that they said, we really don't know what happened. We just know the train didn't, and it was 500,000. So when you apportion it, it makes the total number of rides that were delayed due to overcrowding much bigger. And you're deflecting attention away from what might be actual operational problems that should be addressed.
So they wanted it, you're saying they wanted to cover up certain problems by sort of dispersing some of these things.
That is what this investigation shows today. You want,
Real last question, guys.
unless there's anybody else? Okay.
Want to weigh in on Bezos?
No. We're sticking to the MTA, but nice try. What was that?
There's a graphic that it's in the exhibits of the report. Okay. Yeah, motion made clear. So once
So we should show it to them.
yeah, it's in their report.
Thank you, everybody.
Next